Okay.
Other people are coming on now. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started this afternoon, and I just really want to thank you all so much for joining us today for our webinar. We're really excited to have Grant Cook with us today from CPAPlus Network, and he's going to be presenting new responsibilities of the CPA in today's marketplace. So we're really very excited about that, and I know Grant's got a great program lined up for you. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. Just want to let you know that this does qualify for one CPE unit based on 50 minutes of instruction and questions and answers. And to qualify for the CPE, you have to be on the webinar the entire time, and you must participate in all 3 polling questions to be able to qualify. So we also will be issuing CPE certificates probably either at the end of this week or first part of next week. So you will be receiving the CPE certificate along with an evaluation. If you could please complete the evaluation for us, because those are very helpful. And we've got a lot of material to cover today. So if there are questions that you might have, if you could please write them in the Q&A, and we'll check those as we go. As well as then our instructor will also answer them while we're doing the polling questions or at the very end. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Grant. Grant has actually spent the last 15 years in the CPA industry and the last 10 years as the Director of Member Resources for CPAPlus Network. He facilitates collaboration between members, much of it geared towards de-commoditization of core services through a leadership-centric approach with clients. So we are really excited. So at this time, Grant, I'm going to go ahead and turn the program over to you, and just really want to thank you so much for doing this for AFWA. We're just very grateful to you. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to you.
No problem. I'm happy to do it. And as Cindy mentioned, all of you can ask questions in the chat window. Cindy, I'll admit I'm new to Zoom, a little behind the times despite what's going on with the COVID crisis. But if there are messages coming through that I don't see, maybe Cindy, if you can notify me or something like that, or just yell at me, be happy to answer them as we go. And then of course, cool. And then we can hit questions at the end here. But yeah, Cindy mentioned I'm part of CPAPlus Network. We're a peer group. CPA practices, tax and accounting, professional service providers. We get together, exchange best practices, collaborate with one another, develop tools, strategies, things like that, all, many of which are geared toward, again, decommoditizing the core work. And what we're going to talk about today are new responsibilities. And these responsibilities are likely going to be different from what some of you, or perhaps all of you, are used to hearing, things that come out of our industries here, really all of professional services. We're used to hearing about, this is what we need to know in terms of technical skills, knowledge of, compliance and regulatory issues. And while all of that is true, we also have some new responsibilities and new skill sets that are dictated by what's going on in culture and how it affects our industries here. All right, so we're going to take a little bit of a different look than what we're used to seeing here. So what we're going to cover, learning objectives, 3 main things. One is getting a base level understanding of what commoditization is and how it's affecting not just the tax and financial industries, but really all of professional services. And based on that, getting in tune with what clients are now, what they're really looking for, or what's valuable in today's marketplace, because there's been a subsequent shift in that as well. And then we'll start getting into how can we start making changes, really beginning with our own thinking of who we are to clients, how we view clients and things like that, in order to evolve into some of these new roles. All right. So before we get into some things, I'd invite everybody, just obviously you don't have to share here, but take about 30 seconds or so. There's a page that says reflection, and on your own, just mentally or jot it down, anything that you feel makes you important or makes you valuable to clients. Just take about 30 seconds here. Anything that makes you important or you feel makes you important or valuable to clients. I'll be mindful of time here. I'll give about 15 more seconds, 15, 20 seconds. Anything that makes you important or valuable to clients. Obviously, there's not a right or wrong with something like this. It can be very subjective. All right, and then what I want to do is sort of take a step back for a minute. And all of you obviously can do this individually, but make note of what came to mind, your gut reaction, whatever you may have written down. And if, you know, I feel most of our gut reactions would be something like, well, I'm knowledgeable, that's what makes me important. You know, I've got knowledge in my core competency, I provide accurate information with explanation to my clients, I'm trustworthy, I have integrity, you know, I'm really service driven, very professional. You know, a lot of these things are kind of, you know, they've perpetuated in our industries for quite a while now. And what I want to do here is take this opportunity, you can all do this, to sort of challenge our own accepted norms, you know, and industry norms that have been handed to us. And, you know, a lot of these things about knowledge that are based in knowledge, you know, information, trust, integrity, and everything like that, that's part of the traditional role of the CPA. And what's interesting about nowadays in today's marketplace is that all of these things are just expected. They're necessary. Okay, and it's not necessarily valuable anymore. There's a difference between necessary and important. Okay, so you got to have these things, but all that does is it sort of just gets you to the plate. Doesn't differentiate you anymore. You don't necessarily win extra points for having these things. You just lose points if you don't. Okay, now I don't want to get cute with analogies or anything like this, but imagine that you move. Right? You move to a new town, a new city, and you've got to find a dentist, okay? And you do your due diligence, you talk to other people, you read reviews on Google, whatever it is that you do, and then you land on somebody and you set an appointment to get your teeth cleaned. Most of us are not going to be up all night the night before going, man, I sure hope this dentist knows how to clean teeth, right? It's expected. You know, we expect that it's going to be done the right way. We're not going to be in pain. There won't be any complications, et cetera. All of these types of expectations have been applied to core work coming out of the CPA, the tax and accounting industry. Simply expected. So we're going to start bridging into, well, what's created this? And then, of course, what's the opportunity that's often untapped on the other side of it? All right. So I'll start with this. There's an elephant in the room in not just our industries here, but all of professional services. There's an elephant in the room that is not being discussed out there, and it's the fact that our core work has become commoditized. Right? It's not a fun thing to think about. We really don't even hear it very often. Now, when I say commoditization, most people will think about like TurboTax. Right? Well, clients can do this on their own, or or the H&R blocks, or there's a lot of options that are out there. But most people's minds immediately go to TurboTax, or you could look at it in QuickBooks from the accounting side or whatnot. Here's the issue with that, is that while the TurboTaxes of the world are a contributing factor, if they were dropped off of the earth tomorrow, we would have the exact same problem. What we have to do is start understanding a client's view or the client's motivation. And I'll use tax prep as an example, right? Why do people get their taxes done? Obviously, most of us probably know the answer. It's because they have to, okay? It's a requirement. Nobody enjoys it. Nobody finds it enlightening. People certainly don't look forward to having it done for them or doing it themselves, whichever route they go. In fact, they dread it. You know, people do it in order to not be in trouble with the IRS, the government, not go to prison, right? All of these normal and effective motivators, but beyond taking care of those core requirements, the perceived value of the service itself tends to level off. Okay, it's a necessary evil. Now, that in and of itself, if you think about it, is a nail in the coffin if that's at the core of what you provide to clients, right? So that's always going to be there. It's not changing, right? Now we can combine that challenge with the fact that there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of options out there in the way of, preparers, practitioners, CPAs, EAs, chain operations, software, everything like that. And what we have is like this perfect storm for cheapening the nature of the work itself in the client's perspective. All right, and what we get as a result of this is I'm going to flip to the next page, is price sensitivity that we've never seen before, and it gets worse year after year. A lack of loyalty, client loyalty that that we again seems to get worse year after year, or at the very least, an inability to scale a traditional practice. All right, or here's another way we could look at it, is that we're more or less capped on what we can charge for this work, for the work that brings the clients in. And this issue transcends the idea of, well, I've got good relationships with my clients, or I've had my clients for 20, 30 years. At a certain point, that doesn't matter. If we continuously raise fees at a significant level, we're going to see these situations where clients are going, look, I love you, you do great work, and I want to stay in touch, but I've got to go somewhere else, and it's only because of price. All right. So what does this create? It creates a situation in which we're relatively limited on how we can grow a practice. You really only have two options. In fact, there's one, which would be to increase your service offering. Okay, makes a lot of sense. It's kind of business 101. We'll offer more to our clients. Run into some pretty early challenges with that. Not only does it take time, but it takes a degree of, of sales ability that may not come naturally to us, marketing expertise that, again, we may not have the time or inclination to learn. Where we tend to kind of fall back collectively as an industry is on what most of us know, which is if you want to grow your practice, you better start ramping up the volume. Okay, it becomes a volume game. And when this spins out of control very quickly, as it normally does, it's like you could be running a small tax and accounting practice and have 1,200 clients, 1,300 clients, and only a few people helping you. And now it's 100-hour work weeks during tax season, 120, sometimes 7 days a week, a couple all-nighters thrown in there, and the entire year kind of becomes a grind, where it's just like, look, I'm going to figure out how to survive through the next deadline, and then I'll try to catch up on everything from there, and it never ends. Okay, and when we're looking at this curve, you'll see some stuff further up on the curve of different types of planning, estate planning, business coaching. That doesn't mean that any of us individually should go out and become estate planners or coaches or something like that. Sure, we need to incorporate some elements or at least oversight into those areas. But the important aspect up toward the top here is where it says PSA or professional service agreement. I'll speak on that in a little while. But think about the nature of the role, what it needs to be. It needs to be not a service provider, but more of a navigator. Okay, no other industry or no other professional designation holds the trust and the credibility more so than the CPA or the EA or the accountant. All right, so what I'm going to talk about is that clients are actually, they're starving for more help, and for the CPA, the accountant, to be in this evolving role that we're going to take a look at. And oftentimes we don't even realize it. All right, so let's flip to page 6 here. Now, it's important to understand how we got to this point. Right? This page is kind of a snapshot of culture or the relationship between culture and the professional service industries over the years. And the column that I want to pay the most attention to here is the middle column, economic phase. Here's where you can write, if any of you have this printed out, write like CPA or core work over it. And the middle column is really, we're going to take a look at how client expectations evolve and how they also have a stacking effect over time. So we've got different economic phases, and one of the themes here is that anytime an economic phase shifts, what used to be considered valuable, it now becomes expected. which we'll look at here, kind of explains how client expectations tend to increase more and more over time, despite the, the commoditization that's happening in the background here. So if we go back to the 1950s, post-World War II, the growth phase of the economy, and things were exploding. If you were in professional services, or we'll just speak in terms of the tax and accounting industry here, if you were even competent at your core work, as in you knew how to do tax prep, things like that, you could treat your clients like cattle and turn your practice into just this churn and burn tax factory, and you didn't even have to be nice to people, and you would have a thriving practice. All you had to do is be competent. Clients would come back year after year, everything like that, and that lasted for quite a while. In fact, until we kind of bumped into the service economy phase in the 1980s. And this happens to be where most of the stuff that comes out of our industry is sort of lodged here. But when we shifted into the service economy, things changed. Okay, it was no longer enough that you were just competent and that you could do the work. Now, on top of that, well, you had to be nice to people, okay, which usually isn't too much of a challenge. There are exceptions. But, this is where we got what many of us hold on to as like the classic service provider. Like, you had to be polite, you had to be available, the client's beck and call. It was about consumer choice. Here's our menu. You tell us what your needs are. We will meet your needs, Mr. and Mrs. Client. Okay. And when you started to take that approach, that real service-driven role at this period of time, that's what differentiated you, and ultimately made you valuable. It's what people were looking for. All right. And that lasted for about a decade. And, and over time, of course, this became the norm, right? And then we got into the 90s. And this was what we're calling the experience economy, right? Now, everything that came before this is expected, right? You had to be a good service person, there at the client's beck and call. It's about consumer choice. Of course, you better be competent what you were doing. All of that's now expected. And on top of that, now it has to be this unique experience, okay? It had to be this fun, unique experience. We saw elements of this, of course, in the corporate world. That's where like Hawaiian Shirt Day, Friday came from. And, there were kind of funny ways of answering your phone. Hey, we're having a wonderful day at so-and-so CPA. How can we help you? We saw some things like that, office themes. There was also a shift in how positions were titled within organizations. For instance, nobody would be called like a receptionist anymore. They'd be the director of first impressions, things like this that contributed to like this unique experience. Now, all of that was, the examples I just mentioned, that was fun. It was interesting. It was cool back then. And a lot of the things, because of cultural changes, we can talk about them now, and they might seem kind of goofy or unique or goofy or gimmicky, if you will. But that was right for the time. Okay. And the unique experience dynamic is true today. Of course, that's different, the experience that people are looking for. And what clients are really looking for is more of an informal in nature, non-professional feel. Not that you don't carry yourself well, but more of a much more human kind of feel that we're not used to portraying in our industry here. And I'll talk more on that in a bit. When we shifted into the 2000s, right, this is when we got into the transformation economy, and client expectations shifted again. And now what we saw were that clients were going, all right, well, if I'm paying for this product or this service, I want to know how this is going to make my life better. All right, they wanted those dots connected for them if they're going to be paying for something. Transformational leadership took a step further in the 2010s. And now what they're looking for coming out of that was just like, I want somebody to, not only do I want to know how this is going to make my life better, my business better, but I want somebody to lead me through these changes and these transitions in my business and in my life. Okay, and that coincides with, if you look to the right column here, what we call safe harbor, which is one place that they can go to simplify everything. Okay, simplify everything and take weight off of their shoulders. And this is part of the evolving role. All right. Now I'm going to
Grant.
jump to page.
Grant.
Yes.
Before you move forward, let's go ahead and do the one poll just so we can do a quick check-in with everybody.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. It's just a simple put in letter A or B. So if everybody could fill that out, we'll go ahead and do that real quick. And just a reminder while you're doing this that, you know, to get the CPE credit, you do need to fill out the poll. And then while we're waiting for this too, Grant, we did have a question on, you know, how do you get the handouts for the polling or for the conference? So I did let everybody know that we'll send those out as soon as the event is over.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Go ahead, Grant. I shared these results,
Okay.
so if you want to go ahead and get started.
Sure. A is significantly more popular than B. All right. I'm going to cover a couple of things on terminology here, just because now when we go forward into the next part of this, I'm going to use terms that are oftentimes thrown around in our industry. We use the term coaching centric quite a bit, and but I want to make note that in today's marketplace, we probably don't want to use the word coaching too often with clients. We use it internally to describe what we're doing, but it's not a big differentiator any longer. And sometimes you run the risk of just sounding goofy. You know, clients don't know what we mean by coaching and everything like that. But when we talk about core work in any of this, what I'm referring to is the core work is whatever brings the client to the table. Like I used the example earlier of tax prep and accounting. It could be payroll. If any of you are in financial services, it could be, you know, financial planning, you know, money management, something like that. So we got the core work. The consulting is a word that's oftentimes, again, thrown around in our industries. We define consulting as any additional analysis or game planning or action items beyond the core work, right? So of course, in the CPA industry, the most familiar form of consulting would probably be tax planning, okay? It's beyond just standard tax preparation, you know, often requires additional analysis beyond just the core expectation, even though tax planning is kind of becoming an expectation as well. Coaching or coaching centric is going to be a bit different. Okay, and I'll use an example here for all of you in a few minutes. Here's how you could look at the coaching-centric dynamic, is that behind any kind of consulting elements, any type of planning that we can be doing for clients, whether it's business or personal, there's nearly always going to be dynamics that are far more important that relate to the client's life, that relate to the client's business, sometimes even their habits. You know, things that if they're not addressed, the intended results of our planning will often be hindered. You know, our planning may fall flat, may not be effective, whereas if they are addressed appropriately, we can get results for clients far better than what most of us ever imagine. You know, that's where we get into a place where, you know, we're not just doing good, accurate work and planning for clients, that it has this transformational effect on their businesses and their lives. And again, I'll hit an example here in a couple of minutes. But where we have to start with this is, I'm going to jump to page 8 here. We have to start where we're changing our own viewpoints. Okay, we can't rely on on clients to make these adjustments and see the value, if you will, in what we're doing. We have to make these changes first, and it starts with how we think. And I mentioned that at the beginning. Well, first off, we have to change the way that we view clients. Right? It's very easy to get caught into viewing clients almost like engagements with people that we really like, which in and of itself will commoditize us. But here's how I would invite everybody to start viewing clients: is that any client that walks into your office or your Skype, given I guess we got to stop talking about offices temporarily. Any client that you're sitting across from, or virtually or otherwise, you're on the phone with, they need a lot more help than they're getting from a core work standpoint. All of them. Okay, and it doesn't matter their situation, it doesn't matter their socioeconomic status, their wealth, their success, their intelligence. Everybody needs more help. And that's the truth. And the reasons behind that are actually more cultural and societal. The point number 2 here. To say that we're living in interesting times right now would be a massive understatement. COVID aside, right? But take a look at today's world. All right. In fact, the first factor under point number 2, change. Things change faster than ever in today's world. I mean, we could look at it from a business standpoint where we've got, just take a look at the speed at which automation and artificial intelligence is permeating arguably anything that deals with data or data analysis. You've got a competitive marketplace that spans the entire world now. It's not limited to just any of our geographical locations. We've got to make decisions faster than ever. We got to constantly be on, right? We're on our phones, we're answering emails, and it feels like 24/7. It's chaos, and that's only the business side of it. We're trying to do all of that while balancing, what we see, or trying to find balance in our own lives and being good family members and parents in some cases. Other cases, we got kids running around the house. We're trying to do work right now. That's my problem, at least. So we may not think of life as chaos on an everyday basis, but when we really step back, it is. Okay, all of us are dealing with this, but I am going to talk about it in the context of working with clients. So right out of the gate, we've got more change than ever, and as human beings, we're naturally averse to change. Okay, it will bring with it a sense of uncertainty. How's this going to impact my family, my life, my business, my career, et cetera? Right, so right out of the gate, there's at least a low-level humming of anxiety with all clients, okay, whether they realize it or not, right? Second factor here, excuse me, choice. Okay, we've got more decisions to make than ever, or clients do. Again, I'll speak through that context. Clients have more decisions to make than ever, and they've got more choice than ever in any of these decisions. Okay, and think about what people do, what clients do when they're faced with a decision to make in an area in which they're not well versed. So what do people do? They'll Google it. That's typically the first thing, right? People will Google it. They'll get 750 million results in less than a second. Okay, and sometimes it's easy to kind of discern between good information and garbage on the internet, and sometimes it's not so easy, right? But they get hit with a flood of information, right? And then what they'll do is they'll ask other people around them, like, hey, I got a decision to make. Maybe it's in my business or in relation to my family financially or something. And they'll talk to peers and friends and family members, right? And what do they get? They get more information. Okay, oftentimes conflicting. You get somebody saying, oh, don't listen to so-and-so, this is what worked for me. Here are some other things you may want to consider. And what we get as a result of that is a situation in which the human brain is literally not wired to be able to process the amount of information that anyone's getting hit with at any given time. Right? So the result of it is that, yes, clients have all these decisions to make, but what do they do as a result of this overwhelm? Usually one of two things. They'll either do nothing, right, as a result of the analysis paralysis as we've come to know it, or they'll go out and they'll do the wrong thing, right? And it might be they listen to the wrong person, or they just end up making a gut or emotional decision because they can't handle everything else. They got all these other fires to put out. And oftentimes doing nothing and doing the wrong thing both lead to the same place. All right. So the question becomes, well, what are clients really looking for? All right. And it's not what it was even 10, 15 years ago. Okay. And we could narrow it down to really one word, which is, well, here, I'll speak universally and I'll drill down further based on some of these cultural factors. Everyone's looking for roughly the same thing. In fact, everyone across the world, there have been studies on this, pretty in-depth. In fact, from Gallup, I think it was about 13 years ago, they found that everybody, regardless of again, religion, socioeconomic status, all these other things, looking for the same thing, which is a sense of peace. Okay, probably not a shock to any of us, right? People are looking for a sense of peace. But what gives people a sense of peace in today's culture, this chaos of today's culture, is one word: guidance. Okay, people are looking for guidance. Now, how does this go beyond where our industry has traditionally been? When we take a look at the role, the traditional role of the CPA and what's made many successful over the years, our industry is based off of information and education, right? You provide people with the right information and you educate them on it, and therefore we put them into the position where they can make an informed decision. It doesn't work like that anymore. Okay, the hard reality is that nobody wants more information and nobody wants more education. We're all drowning in it. And if we stay in that traditional role, if you think about it here, everybody, what we're doing, we're actually contributing to the overwhelm. We're contributing to the very problem that we're often trying to fix. Okay, and we can see this on a day in and day out basis. For instance, if for those of you that are particularly in public practice, although this goes into industry as well, you're used to getting hit with questions that have nothing to do with the work at hand. You might be sitting down to review a tax return or something like that, and the client goes, hey, they throw like a seemingly unimportant question at you, like, hey, what's up with interest rates? They're plummeting right now, and do you think I should refinance my house? Or do you think I can afford this car? Like, what are your thoughts on X, Y, or Z? And it's easy to fall into a traditional kind of trap, or what's now become a trap, in believing that what that client's looking for is the right piece of data. They're looking for me to do the right analysis so I can give them the right piece of information that they can use to make their decision. Makes all the sense in the world, right? If the world was a purely logical place, of course, which it's not. What the client's looking for is something else. What they're really saying is, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing here. All right, I'm freaking out, and I trust you more than anybody else. I just want you to tell me what I need to do. It's what they're looking for, right? In fact, most of the time they're going, I don't even want to know why you got to this point. They know, you're expected to do the right analysis and everything like that, take all the important information into consideration. Most of the clients don't even want to hear it. They're just looking to be led, whether they realize it or not. Okay, so this in and of itself, if you think about it, guys, is another layer of responsibility that has been dictated by culture. Okay, in fact, again, any of you that find yourself in these situations regularly, you might be thinking about times where you're trying to explain something to a client, and they politely, of course, interrupt you and go, hey, I appreciate the explanation here, but can you just tell me what I need to do? The writing's on the wall when we take a step back and start looking at things differently. And I look at it this way: for every one client that you have that politely interrupts you to frame that question, probably got 30 or 40 more that feel that they'd be rude by doing that, and they don't do it at all. They just sit there, and that's what's going on in their minds as we're melting their brains with justification and information and data and education. We might find it valuable, most people do not. Now, with this, again, I'll stress this responsibility of guiding clients through decisions. I'm not saying to get cavalier about it, right? Or to make uninformed decisions or whatnot. We're taking into account necessary analysis, information that we know about the client, what's going on in the client's life, business, and everything like that. But when we get to this place with them, everybody, it shifts the nature of who we are to them, where we become almost like a mental vacation for them. So instead of dreading coming into the office or being overwhelmed when they leave the office. They go, man, when I'm in that office, that's the one place I've got in my life where I don't have to figure everything out on my own. And in the chaos of culture today, that's worth a fortune. All right. So I'm going to start bringing some of this to.
If you want.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
If you want, we'll go ahead and run the second poll. You can keep talking while we're running it.
Okay.
So if you would please go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and start the second poll here. Let's see. Hold on a minute. So on poll two, if you could just enter B or C, and I'm going to go ahead and let you go ahead and keep talking, and then when we're done here, I'll share the results.
Sure, no problem. So again, I'll start to bring this together, and in fact, we can hit an example here that we dealt with somewhat recently. All right, so what's missing in most cases in getting our intended results? And what I mean by intended results here, everybody, is that, I can't speak for everybody. I don't know exactly who's here, or personal details or whatnot, but I can say, generally speaking, that most of us, at least on some level, and probably a significant level, got into professional services to not just to do work, but to help people. Okay, but to really help people. And I'll give you an example of what often kind of gets in the way of our work leading to that. All right, but in shifting our mentality, there should be three things that happen with every single client on some level. And it doesn't matter if it's a business client, a personal client, what have you. Often it doesn't even matter what realm of professional services you're in. It could be a legal professional, an advisor, a CPA, accountant. It's fairly universal. But the three things are core work, consulting, and then the advanced coaching, or the coaching centric. All right, again, I kind of laid out those details earlier, as well, the semantics of what I mean by core and consulting and coaching. But here's the scary reality, is that we could do core work and planning or consulting perfectly. I mean, like textbook perfect planning, and be doing relatively little to get the results that we want to get for clients. And I know that we're not used to getting hit with a scenario like that, but I'll give you an example of something that we ran into recently that could incorporate all kinds of planning or realms of professional services. There's a business owner that was selling his business and retiring subsequently. It was a 30-year business he built from scratch, telecom industry, and was successful, quite successful, selling it for about $6-7 million. Okay. Now, when we approach a scenario like that, of course, we tend to look at it through the lens of what kinds of core work are going to be needed to complete this engagement, right? So evaluation was pulled together, including a buy-sell agreement. In this case, he was selling his business to a couple of employees that had been with him for long term. There's tax planning involved, of course. There would undoubtedly be some estate planning procedures needed. Make sure insurance is there, whatever, wills, trusts, things like that as it would relate to the family. Even some consultative aspects of transitioning responsibilities within this company from one owner to the future owners. Okay, and we could do all of these things. I'm only scratching the surface for the sake of an example, but we could do all of this and then step back and go, all right, well, this is a pretty complete engagement. This client's going to be in good shape going forward. By the way, the advisor was involved. They're going to do financial planning and money management and all that other stuff, right? So on paper, complete engagement. All right. And what we could be doing with this is missing what's going to ultimately stand in the way of this client having a better life. I don't know if any of you are thinking about it or not, but all that stuff on paper needs to be done. But I'll throw a couple of questions out there. What's going to happen to this client when he starts getting bored, right? Selling a business that he's dedicated his life to for 30 years, in this case, this particular client. He's probably thinking, all right, well, look, I can kick back now. I can play golf, visit the grandkids, blah, blah, blah. As a family, maybe we'll travel or whatever. Probably doesn't see the boredom coming, right? Like most people, I'll be able to handle it. All right, well, what happens when that really starts kicking in? How about this one? You think he sees this identity crisis coming down the line? Most people don't. You know, most people don't realize how much they've tied their sense of self-worth as a human to what they do for a living, right? And this is especially prevalent with, with business owners, right? Well, do you think he sees that coming? Probably not. But when that kicks in, coincides with boredom, what do we see? We see various levels of depression. You know, somebody almost like losing their sense of meaning when they get out of bed every day. You know, how many couples actually plan to spend 24/7 with one another, right? In a way that enhances the relationship as opposed to, of course, detriment, right? Most couples don't plan for that. And we see it over and over again. You know, you could have a happily married couple for 40 years and you know, both of whom say retire at the same time and don't plan this out. And it's like they're at each other's throats. Right? So we can have a situation here, guys, and again, I'm only using a couple of examples of elements that are prevalent in today's culture, and you know, and retirement's only one major transition. We could do this 100 different ways, but we could do perfect planning. And what are the results that we get for the client if you think about it? Well, the client's bored, they're half depressed, their health is failing, and their marriage is falling apart. Probably not what we intended on getting with this client when we set out to help them. So what we really have to ask ourselves are, well, if this is happening, oftentimes right under our noses where we may not even realize it, and clients may not even realize it, believe it or not, are we really even doing important work? You know, or are we just going through the motions, right? So what gets in the way of us getting our intended results, which is this, you know, it's transformational dynamics with clients, more than anything else, is behavior, right? And contrary to what we're used to hearing, one of the most important, arguably the most important thing we can be doing for clients is stepping into a place of almost like behavior management, business management in some cases, life management, right? I know it can sound hokey at first, but this is a completely different skill set. Right, and one that the modern, we'll say the modern CPA needs to be able to attain in order to help people. You know, and these skill sets could include leadership. This is all stuff that we get into with one another in our group, but leadership, emotional intelligence in some cases, you know, change management, sometimes habit development. Right, there's a massive opportunity for this stuff, and in many cases, our industries tend to almost downplay these things as soft skills, right? They call them soft skills. And ironically, these quote unquote soft skills are ultimately usually the deciding factor as to, you know, again, getting the results that we want to get for clients, transformational, tangible results in their businesses and their lives. And you know, the revenue, the subsequent revenue that we can drive to the firm as a result of this is arguably mind-blowing. We get into formalizing all of these engagements, which we'd have to hit a different time. And even from a marketing perspective, it allows us to cut through all of the noise that's out there in this saturated marketplace. All right, and one more thing that I'll hit here, and just being mindful of time, on page 10 is this has been essentially teed up by what's going on with the COVID crisis. All right, and I'm not talking about it from an opportunistic standpoint of there's a, you know, global pandemic, how can we make money off of it? I don't think that's right, right? But what I do know is that the COVID crisis has taken what's already been brewing in terms of this expanded opportunity for those in professional services, and it's taken that what's already been brewing and more or less put it on steroids. Okay, so now we've got more than ever an opportunity to step into a leadership role with clients. You know, what clients are looking for right now, just to give you a couple of examples, is what they're able to get virtually nowhere else, which is a kind of a calm, balanced voice of leadership. Right? They already look to our profession for that anyway. But you know, how do I What they're really looking for is like, how do I respond to all of this? You know, how do I attain balanced concern versus, you know, irrational fear? You see people fighting each other for hand sanitizer and toilet paper, all this crazy stuff out there. You know, how can I adapt with my business, you know, to be able to survive or sometimes even thrive? How do I find opportunities based on what's going on right now, and maybe reframing my business, running it remotely, interacting with clients remotely? How can I work from home with with my kids running around? Again, that one's close to home for me, you know. But we got to be mindful of common traps in this too, like pigeonholing, excuse me. You know, where clients are saying like, or believing that clients are only looking for help with SBA funding, you know, navigating the PPP, things like that. It's a lot more than that. Or here's a trap: clients aren't calling me, they must be fine. Not the case. They're freaking out whether they call or not, right? So it provides a perfect opportunity for outreach here. You know, and this is, again, stuff that we get into a bit further. And in fact, we've been getting into some things about how do we run even like almost our own town halls with clients and those in our communities, and bringing in experts in the medical field. And we've been innovating on this. But guys, clients need it more than ever, this leadership, and they're not getting it at a national level. They're certainly not getting it from our politicians. Not so much from business leaders, as was once the case. And they're certainly not going to get it from news. Balance does not sell. All right. So all of these things are what we can. I'm keeping an eye on the clock. We're about at 2:50. But above all else here, everybody, we've got these additional layers of responsibility that require a different frame of mind, you know, different thinking, a kind of a repositioning of what's valuable or what our value is that we can bring to clients, okay, and subsequently new skill sets that we can learn that are not being tapped right now, okay. And when we step into that role, some of these roles, again, what we're able to do is we get transformational results for clients. I mean, they're living differently because of us, right? And they know it. We call it client dependence. We use dependence in a good way, although that word can take on negative connotations. But clients are dependent on us. You know, we're not just a service provider. We're like this navigator for them. You know, and all the while we can increase firm revenue. And here's something that's a bit more subjective, but it's more fun. For most people, it's more rewarding. Right? And all of this has sort of been served in some ways on a silver platter by culture. Okay, so all of this is more that we get into, and in fact, I think anybody in AFWA can access CPAPlus Network anyway, and we'll be doing more joint sessions as we go forward. But we're at the 50-minute mark right now, so we can kind of open up. And Cindy, I'll follow your lead on, you know, how you handle questions, or if I need to pull up the chat window or something like that.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'm going to launch the final poll here real quick. So if you could please answer the poll for choose D or E on this poll. And then if you have a question, if you want to raise your hand, we can go ahead, and what I can do then is I'll just, once I see your hand is raised, I'll go ahead and allow you to talk. Otherwise, you can type your questions in the Q&A. So does anybody have any questions that they would like Grant to answer? Julie, I see that you did have a question on here, so I'm not sure if you're still on or not, but I will, looks like you are. So if you do you have a question?
No, I think I hit that button by accident, sorry.
Okay, all right. I'll go ahead and unmute you then. All right, does anybody else have any other questions or? All right, is there anything else then, Grant, that you want to go over, or anything else that you want to cover?
Not necessarily. One more thing that I'll add that is more specific to AFWA, and Cindy, you and I have talked about this. It's one of the reasons that we're so supportive of what you all are doing as an organization. But this evolving role and the type of leadership that that clients are seeking, whether they realize it or not, is it's much more of a natural role for women to be able to adapt to than men. Women have a decided advantage. I mean, not only from a societal level do we need more women in leadership, which is one of the reasons that we're doing anything we can run alongside you guys as an organization, but it's a very, the style of leadership and guidance that people are looking for is a very human one, very tied with empathy, and empathetic style of leadership that women tend to adapt to much easier than men, and oftentimes do it better than men anyway. Whereas men fight these ridiculous social norms about, don't allow emotions into business, and and stick to the numbers and all these things. So not only is the opportunity specific within our industry, but the sector of industry that is run by women, and we're passionate about that. And again, happy to support AFWA any way that we can.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing this webinar for us, and I just really want to thank you all for joining us. And we've got a lot of exciting things going on at AFWA, and just really, again, what we'll be doing with this webinar is we'll be handing out, I'll get the copy of the slide deck from Grant, and we'll send it out to all of you so that you all have it. And then we will also be posting this to our website. So if any of you want to go back and listen to it again or share it with some of your friends and colleagues, feel free to do so. Grant, thank you so much for doing this program for us. And so with that, we'll go ahead and close the program. And so thank you all so much for attending.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Grant.
All right. Bye-bye.